This is the Ridge Hunter Outdoors podcast. Hey everybody, this is episode 18. I'm Canyon Clark here with Nate Burgess, Scott Clark, and Jeff Fry. We got the full crew back tonight. We were going to have a guest on tonight, but had some stuff come up, so we're going to do that next week. So we'll still have him come on. It'll just be next week. We're looking forward to that still. I know I was looking forward to getting to talk to him tonight. So we'll get to talk to him next week and pick his brain about some public land stuff and some big timber stuff, because that's what he mostly does. And I know I feel like I'm probably the one with the most public land experience here as far as deer hunting goes, and that's very, very limited. So it would take someone other than us to tell you about that. So we're going to use him for that as a resource to talk about that next week. But for now, for this week, since we were planning on having him in, I didn't go through and pick an article out. But I think it'd be a good time to talk about what we're doing now that the season's over. It's closed up pretty much everywhere. And what we're doing as far as, maybe we'll talk a little bit about shed hunting. We'll talk about running cameras, maybe how long you're going to run them, if you run them all year, what you're using that for, going in and doing some postseason scouting while the sign's still fresh, and then starting to put the plan together for next season, because as soon as this season ends, you know, you're looking forward to next year. At least I am, and that's what we do. We got a few people lined up that are already thinking about that too. So first off, Nate, we were just talking about it. You got a few pictures of of antlered bucks still. They haven't all dropped them.
Yeah.
A couple smaller younger bucks, but
those were monster 8-pointers right there.
Yeah.
No, they were just probably 2 and 3 year olds. I hadn't had any buck pictures in weeks, you know. But I have had a lot of doe pictures. Oh, that one cold snap we had a couple weeks ago. Had a great big doe herd that was moving through that draw in front of that one cell cam. Heading out to that winter wheat field. I sound like a broken record there. They keep going out there, you know. And then these bucks tonight, they were, 30 minutes before dark. They were going out there. Is what it looked like. So, yeah, down there. They're in the thick cover, approaching that winter wheat field is what they've been doing. But I had a couple of young bucks make it.
I went Sunday for the last day of our season and killed a doe. But Sunday, sitting there and then going in the next morning and getting that doe, I saw a lot of deer running through in daylight. When I was getting her out, 9:30 in the morning, they were moving through there. So not any big bucks. Saw some younger bucks like what you're seeing. So that was good to see. And then I pulled my camera and had some deer from about a week ago working the licking branch still. So as kind of a testament to those things working all year round and the scrapes and stuff. But and then Jeff, you were talking about even seeing a nice buck on the way home tonight.
Yeah, out in the cornfield, a bunch of does, and he's probably a good quarter or more off the road, and I just happened to look over and seen the does, and he picked his head up, and he was a dandy.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, he's one that would be on my hit list if I could hunt that area, which I can't, but I'd sure like to.
Yep. The reason I kind of point that out is obviously not all the bucks have lost their antlers yet, but in the next 3-4 weeks, most of them will be gone. There are some dropping.
This is maybe the first year I can remember. This past weekend was the late season, which is antlerless only. I can't remember not getting in a buck that had already dropped its antlers. And this is the first year that we didn't get a buck that had already dropped. So I don't know if they're running late this year for some reason, but typically you would see a mixture, some horns, some not, and I don't know.
Yeah, and there have been some. I've seen guys posting on stuff. I haven't seen any personally. I did make sure the doe that I shot, double-checked her head before I shot her, but I have saw some guys posted on social and stuff that there's some deer starting to drop. And I know some had heard from guys, you know, even a couple weeks ago where they were dropping. So there's going to be some out there, but it might be a little bit early yet to start shed hunting. But if you're out there scouting, it might not be a bad idea to keep your eye out. But before we get into the scouting part of it, while we're on the shed hunting, because that will be in the next few weeks, and I don't know how much we'll get to talk about that depending on who we've got on and what we're talking about. But what about in the past, you guys been some of the best places for finding sheds where you had made the most success maybe?
Bedding areas.
Yeah.
Wherever your mom goes, because I can't find them.
Yeah.
I normally wander aimlessly and trip over them.
Yeah.
I have stepped on 2 different horns in my life while I was shed hunting that I did not see until I stepped on them. So I seriously unlucky or not good at shed hunting.
Yeah. I kind of find that with myself too. I know some guys that you know them too that do pretty good at it. So maybe we'll try to have them on in a few weeks. But
Yep.
Jeff, I know you found a few over the years at least.
I've found several, and then my ex-wife decided to use them for arts and crafts. But I had quite a collection at one time.
To clarify, that's not why she's the ex-wife, but
No, but still, it happened.
probably didn't help things.
No, it didn't help nothing. So let's just say my collection of sheds diminished during the divorce. But no, all kidding aside, I'd always focus on bedding areas, and I would never go until usually about last week of February, first week of March, and then from March 1st on through the whole month of March is when I focus most of my attention. And I had a lab, and I trained him and stuff. And, he wasn't the best at it, but he would find something for me that I couldn't see. But we'd always concentrate on bedding areas, and then I'd go from bedding areas to what I knew was travel corridors from bedding to food sources. Yeah. Late winter food sources, and I always had a lot of success with that.
Yep. I think you hunt sheds a lot, similar to the way you hunt the bucks, because
Right.
obviously they're going to fall off where the bucks are. So, but the thing you can do with shed hunting is you can go right into their bedroom and
Right.
find those sheds where
Yeah.
you're not going to go sit in their bedroom and hunt them. But that's a good place to start. And then not only that, even if, like you said, you're just wandering aimlessly and you happen to trip over them, take note of that. And then that's a pretty good tool for next year where those bucks are using, maybe where they're bedding. If you find a shed in a spot and there's a couple beds around, some rubs and stuff, obviously there's a really good chance that's where he was staying.
Yep.
Same thing with the travel corridors. If you find sheds along those, it's
There's
a pretty good indication they've been using them pretty frequently.
I have 4 areas on my list that even though I don't hunt them for deer, I know that if I go there about the 2nd or 3rd week of March, yearly I will find sheds in those areas, because I know that's where the bucks bed. They bed there all the time, every year, and I just know that about the 2nd or 3rd week of March, go there and you'll find some sheds. And
So I got a question for you, Nate. You're running cell cams, and do you keep them up all year?
No, I don't.
You put them and take them down.
Yep.
When do you take them down?
Normally mid-February.
Okay.
Normally, yeah. Mainly because I just don't want to pay for the subscription.
Okay.
Year round.
But what I was getting at was, so if you see the bucks that you're after, say you've got a target buck or two in the fall and maybe during the rut, and you got them patterned and all that. I was wondering what I was getting at was if you were using your cell cameras to say, okay, here's my target buck, and today he's got antlers, and okay, next day he's only got one. The day after he didn't have any. Hey, I know.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you'd ever tried that or ever thought about that, or if they don't use that same pattern or what.
Yeah. I hadn't been smart enough until right now. But yeah, honestly, I mean that'd work.
If the bucks kept the same pattern throughout from what you're looking at in hunting season till now, and maybe they don't. I don't know.
As long as you had a cell camera wherever he's at right now, wherever he wants to be right now, that should work.
Which is not. You don't think it's the same place as it was, say, in late November when he's.
A lot of times mine move. They really do. A lot of times and of course I don't have too much.
Well,
woods.
we've got ground. You've heard Kenyon talk about the cabin.
Yeah.
They don't stay there either.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah.
They're moving in and out of there, but you couldn't say, okay, he's going to come by here today, the same thing as he did in November. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. What I call the sprout patch. It's just a creek. And then there's a whole bunch of ash sprouts. Of course, they're all dead now. You know, there's probably 30-foot tall trees. All as big around as my arm to my leg, you know. But they'd stay in that thicket and then along that creek. But it slopes. It's a east-facing hill, real thick down there. That's where they all go in the winter to try to stay out of the winter, the wind and the weather.
Right.
But yeah, they all go down there. And I've never had a cell cam down there yet because I don't have food plots down there. I want to change that. But yeah, you could totally use a cell cam, you know, to figure out when he's dropped. And then also, hopefully, it give you an indication maybe even which direction he might have went and dropped, you know.
Yep.
It worked.
I'm still old school. I don't have cell cams. I'm not up on all that. But I still use the regular SD cards, you know, and stuff. And you can use the camera. I've left up until this year. I took my camera down early this year because I'm next to public ground and, you know, a lot of stuff going on. I don't know, I felt uneasy about it this year. But when I was on private ground where I didn't have to worry about it, that is a useful tool. You can go in there and you can say, okay, like Scott said, this day the buck had horns. Or, you know, both antlers. You know, a week later, okay, he's only got one. And a week later, okay, he doesn't have any. And so you kind of know he's in that area, and you can go through there, and it's kind of a key time to know that, you know, let's start looking for his antlers if that's the buck that you're wanting to find. Mm-hmm. And not only that buck, but other bucks that, you know, may not be your target buck, but, you know, if you're like me, I just love finding sheds. It's just, you know,
it gets you excited.
It does.
I think what you're talking about, taking those cameras down, and like you, Nate, you're probably on this already. Maybe you thought about it, maybe just coincidence when you take them down. But if you can keep those cameras up, but you don't want to run them all year, like you said, whether you don't want to pay for the subscription for the extra few months, or whether you're uneasy about leaving them up all year because someone might come in, or whether you don't want to run batteries through them all year, I think the best time probably to take them down would be after you see those bucks drop their antlers, because it's going to allow you this time of year to still take an inventory and see who's left, what bucks you got left on your property until they drop your antlers, and then you can't tell anyway.
Yep.
So if you're going to take them down and not run them all year, which I don't either, I think a good time to start looking at taking them down is after you see those bucks drop them anyway.
Yeah.
And then you can still use it for finding those sheds potentially if you got the bucks like that.
I always took mine down the last of March.
Yeah.
When I was on private ground.
Yeah. I think that's a good time.
I hated to take mine down already, but I just, you know.
Right. Well,
I just felt uneasy about leaving it up this long.
Unless you're in a situation like Nate where the cameras aren't where they're going to be this time of year anyway, because they're moving in a different area.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're not going to see those bucks you're probably wanting to look at anyway.
Yep.
And that's a good point to hit on there, because everything, like where you're finding the sheds now this time of year, and then where you're seeing them on the camera, and then when you go in and do your postseason scouting right now, because a lot of that sign's still fresh and everything, and you can see it, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where the deer are going to be next time the rut comes around next year. A lot of times deer will have similar patterns from the early season to the late season, depending on the property. A lot of times they may have 3 different patterns from early season, depending on how big your property is and what kind of diversity you have. But for sure, what you see now and what you see on those cameras or don't see will give you a good idea at least where they're going to be next year at this time in the late season, and where you find those sheds. Like I said, they're probably going to have a different range between the rut and the late season. As we all know, they're going to use different places. You get some of those homebody bucks that are going to stay generally in the same area, but a lot of times they'll have their early season pattern until the pre-rut kicks in, and then they'll start setting their rut range and dominance there, and then after that they'll go into their late winter pattern. And like I said, you can use what you're seeing on the camera now, maybe not necessarily set yourself up for the next rut, but definitely what they're doing late season.
And that's the thing where the cameras come into play for me, is because I normally don't get to hunt the peak of the rut. I get to hunt, you know, early October, pre-rut, and then I hunt post-rut late season. And so Yeah, it's great seeing them during the rut on the camera and stuff. I still use it. I have my camera up there wherever I can. But also, I use that to tell me what's going on during the periods that I can hunt. And so it's a great tool to use. And I really like it after gun season because it tells me, okay, these are what bucks are left.
Yeah.
And because, naturally during gun season I'm elsewhere. I can't be out hunting, so that gives me a kind of like an inventory of what's left. Do I want to spend my time here, or do I need to go somewhere else?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of uses for cameras besides just keeping track of a deer or your target buck or whatever. It kind of gives you an idea of what's going on in your hunting area at any given time.
Yeah, and that's, as far as leaving them up, that's valuable information year over year, because the deer are generally going to fall back into the same pattern as long as they weren't killed if they're in that same area. So what you saw this year, we've talked about this before, is likely what they're going to be doing next year around the same time. So you don't even necessarily have to go week by week with that, which you can do, and it's a good way to do it. But you can look at it for next year even, and say, okay, this is where I need to be, adjust where I was, whatever, for next season coming up. And I use the cameras for that as much as anything. And then this time of year, collecting all that data and information on the deer, where they're going, when they're there, and then using it for next year. There's some places like the cabin that it doesn't do me any good to worry about particular bucks for the next season, because rarely do I have the same buck there over next year, because the way it's set up now, it's more of just a travel corridor during the rut for them to come and check hot doe. So there's not necessarily that holdover of bucks. But on a piece like up at Tubbsy's, I can see, okay, there's this many bucks here, and then next year I can see if there's still that same amount of bucks. But where they're using this stuff, there's generally some holdover there up on that property year to year, as long as they don't get killed, where they're going to be back. So I can use this year's information to help me, be better next year.
And if you're like me hunting next to public ground, it's like, okay, well, crap, this buck didn't make it. I ain't seen him since shotgun season, so I'm not going to focus my attention on trying to find him anymore. And so I'm going to try to, find a different target buck.
Yeah. And then that, even if you're beside public ground or you're hunting public ground, if you're running cameras on it, may give you an idea of what time of year that the ground's getting a lot of pressure, because you'll start to see a change in the deer, or you'll start to see less deer on the camera in general. Like if it comes to the second week of November and then your camera's just dead, probably a good indication you need to be getting in there before then and hunting those deer. And that's similar with gun season too. Even on private property, you'll be able to see how much pressure you're really getting around you, how much difference gun season is making, whether it's you're not seeing any more deer, or maybe you're seeing more deer because they're getting pushed onto your property after gun season. But that's definitely, all that stuff I think goes into running your camera still even yet this time of year, even though obviously you can't say, well, man, my target buck's in my food plot, I'll go hunt him tomorrow because the season's over, but use that information for next year. And then with that goes into like the postseason scouting, which we'll talk a little bit about what this time of year, what you're doing as far as getting out there and walking, whether it is shed hunting or even now, is you just want to get out there and see while the sign's still fresh. What are some things, Nate, that you're looking for this time of year? I mean, if you go out there and walk, just getting started for next year, what are you looking at particularly? Anything, or just whatever stands out? Or
you can. I always felt like you could gauge kind of where the buck activity was late season and now postseason, new versus old rubs. You can tell if it's a rub from this year, but it's he didn't make it any time recently. Like you guys talked last week, you had a decent buck come in that was still rutting,
Yes.
Probably chasing doe fawns or just does that had consistently been missed. He's still going to be rubbing somewhere, so those very few bucks that are out there that would have still been rutting, they'd still be rubbing,
Sure.
when he's trying to tend those does. So that'd give you an idea of where he's at late season, if he is still rubbing, or of course they're going to rub a bunch early season. You'll find a bunch of those real old rubs, but then of course food sources, you can see where they've been hitting them if there's a bunch of browse pressure, and gosh, thickets. I just, for me, everything that I've got, they're just buried in the thickets this time of year. You know, scrapes. You can see old scrapes, old licking branches. You know, where they've got them twisted off and stuff. But yeah, I intend to do what I call the sprout patch. I intend to do a lot of work down there this year. So I intend to walk it several times and really rack my brain to see if I can figure out a good plan for down there.
Yeah. And this is a great time of year to be doing that because you can see everything.
Yep. Trails are beat down.
Yeah.
You know?
And you can see that old sign, and there's not a bunch of undergrowth. You can still see where the real thick undergrowth is because the branches and stuff are still there, but it's dead, so you can see through the woods still.
Yep.
You know, and all that good stuff. So
you should have a bunch of beds. You should be able to find, you know, all the leaves, of course, have been off for at least 2 months, you know. You'll be able to see all the beds where they got everything smashed down, you know. You can learn a lot this time of year.
yeah, the trails is a big one for me. If you remember the one we went on down south last year, just south of here, went on a client property and was looking at his place, and it was late January, early February maybe.
That sounds right. Yeah.
You could see we figured out where his deer were moving through during the season. There were just trails beat down like highways, and then we could see where they were using his neighbors at. If you remember that trail.
Yeah. It was like a hog path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where they were going in and feeding on his neighbor who had a food plot program set up and some corn out there and stuff. So you could see we kind of were able to set him up for the next season based on what we were seeing this time of year. And the trails were a lot to do with that, rub lines and stuff.
Yeah, he was his neighbor had some food, like Canyon said, food plots set up and some corn along the edges and things you want to do. It looked like, he didn't get on his property. It looked like he was doing it right. And the client Canyon had was concerned that he was taking his deer from him. Well, he wasn't necessarily taking the deer from him. He was actually enhancing this client's property. We just had to kind of get him to look at that in a different light. That no, he's not stealing your deer. They're just running over there to feed, and then if you can enhance them to come over here and still bed on your property, you've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
You don't have to maintain a food plot. You just have to stay the hell out of their bed, you know. And I ain't kidding you. There was a path they had beat down that was probably 3 or 4 inches deep. I'm not kidding you. It looked like a hog trail.
Deep enough it was holding water in a couple places. Yeah.
From that guy's food plot area over to his bed, over to Canyons across the road into the client's property. So, no, you don't have to worry about him stealing your deer. You just need to worry about, let's see what we can do to keep him here and you to not run him off.
Right.
And I think he finally realized that. I think he realized that because Canyon kind of put together a plan for him, and I think he was trying to maintain that plan best
I went back there with you in a few months after that.
Yeah.
And even in late spring, early summer, I mean, the sign was still there. I mean, it was just, you'd have to be blind or not knowing what you was looking at to not know what was going on.
And I remember on the north side of that property too, there was a really good rub line. So there was a couple different directions of travel they were using because the rub line ran east and west, and the trail we're talking about ran north and south. And there was even one down in the bottom in the middle of that property that ran east and west too. So you could get in there this time of year, and even like you said, later into the spring still yet, and get a really good idea of what's going on during the fall, and then kind of tailor
he had
what
food
you're
plot
doing.
to the south, and then he had road hunters on the west side and road hunters on the north side.
Yep.
So, if he could keep the deer in there, that's where they wanted to be, because there was it was like a hillbilly highway on the west side of that, according to him. I don't know, but
I'm satisfied.
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, I didn't doubt the man.
Yeah. And we, like I said, we dream up a plan, and he was working on it last year, and I think he didn't do everything last year. I think he's working his way into it this year too, and I'm curious to see what all he'll get done as far as finishing it up this year, and then seeing what he does this next coming fall. It's like anything. Once you get in there and start doing this stuff, it's a process. So whatever you see and draw that plan up, know what you can get done in a year, and then have reasonable expectations for what's going to happen. Because as soon as you do anything, it's going to change. And you're going to have to wait and see what those changes are, and then you might have to adjust. You might have the perfect plan put together in your mind based on what you're seeing this year, or this sign we're talking about. But as soon as you go in there and change, put in food, put in some different cover for them, it's going to change stuff. So then you're going to may have to make some small adjustments come the next year. And then the next year after that, you'll start seeing improvement. And it's not a 1 year thing. You can definitely come in, and there's some properties that are so gone the other way, you can come in and make a huge difference in a year, but it's still going to take years to see consistently bucks using the property.
Well, take that property of mine, for example. You know, there was a drastic change done within a couple months' time.
Yep.
You know, it was basically clear cut.
Pretty much.
You know, and so the deer went from being there to feeding on white oaks to we don't have a food source, so they disappeared.
Right.
But then it took it a year and a half, almost 2 years to, okay, now the deer's got cover there. You know, so now they're starting to use it for a little bit of a bedding area, especially the does and fawns. So then we started trying to put food plots inside, you know, on the, what am I trying to say, logging trails, you know, to attract the deer and hold them for a little bit. And they started using that. Now our next step is, you know, there's a 3-acre opening, on the one end of the woods, so we're going to put that into a food plot to try to hold even more does and fawns there, and maybe start attracting bucks there, because you know you get a bigger feeding plot like that you're not hunting. Well, then the bucks will come in and start checking for does and stuff during the rut. So, you know, it's not something that's going to happen. You make a change, the deer is not going to adapt, you know, overnight. It's a process, and I have a lot of hopes for this here in the next year or two, and it's been a process over the last 4 years.
Yeah, and you can speed up what you're trying to do if you go in and do your scouting this time of year and base it off that, because you can change a deer, their activity, as much as they'll allow it. So if you have let's say you have a north-south land property, it's a lot longer than it is wide, and you've got a trail running up the west side of it, north and south, and then on the east side of it, you've got no deer activity, but you have this nice open spot where, man, that'd be a good place to put food. Let's say this property's, 20 acres. Well, let's say it's 100 acres, and it's wide enough that, you know, they're not going to go way out of their way across the whole property. So if you go in just because that's a good little clear spot and put your food over there, you're not necessarily going to draw them from the west side all the way over to that food just because that's where the clear spot was. If you go in now and you see, okay, you can see that trail that's on the west side, go in and do the little bit of extra work, put your food closer to that trail, and you're going to have more change in a year than you would have trying to force them all the way across the other side of that property.
I think you see some changes. Smaller properties, which, you know, a lot of people around here don't have 40, 60, 80, 120 acres to hunt, and they're hunting in the middle of it. They may have 10 acres here, 5-acre patch here, 15 over there. Scout that now, do your posts, but in the springtime, drive around, look and see what's going on. In your smaller plots, what your neighbors are doing will affect you a whole lot more than in your bigger plots. If you've only got 10 acres and the neighbor's got 10 acres and the deer come from your neighbors over to your place and all of a sudden there's a double wide going in the middle of that 10 acres, that's going to change what happens to you. And there's nothing you can do about what he's doing, but you just need to be aware of the changes that he's made might change your plan totally. Especially, you know, obviously there's nothing going to be going on in the wintertime, but that's when you need to get out around your property, even in the spring. If you don't turkey hunt or whatever, if you don't mushroom hunt, you get out there anyway and look and see what your neighbors are doing, especially around your smaller plots, because that can change. I mean, they may put in, a sawmill.
Right, yeah, yeah.
You know.
And that, what you're saying about those smaller properties, you can make them hunt bigger if you take those things into account. If your neighboring property is a 60-acre grain field, you don't need to worry about putting 5 acres of corn on your 10-acre property. Make a bedding area on 5 acres of that property. Keep the deer there during the daylight. Put you a small little food plot between them and the corn. You know, just for example. Maybe your neighbors have really good bedding on one side And on the complete opposite side is that ag field or that big destination food field. Then you want to put maybe a couple food plots on your 10-acre property. And you're going to be able to see how they're using that property if you go scout that now based on the trails and stuff. And then, like you said, driving around, seeing what your neighbors are doing. And even the same as while you're walking your property this time of year and you can see everything, you can see so much more from the road this time of year because there's no vegetation. So even just driving around, man, you can see a lot of what's going on. And most of the corn's out, or even if they left it for a food plot, by this time, some of it's getting knocked down. It's getting pretty sparse in the middles of it and stuff. So you can see through there and see what they got going on. Stuff you can't see from an aerial because they've done it in the last year. Then you can get an idea of what I need to be doing to my property to make it better. And on those small properties, you can't have everything that a deer's going to need. And even on a 300-acre property, you're probably not going to be able to have everything that a deer needs, 400, 500 acres, even on that size of property. But especially on the small ones, you can make a hunt bigger by seeing what you have around you, what you're lacking or what you do have already, how they're using it, and then go in on one thing that's going to help you the most. Don't bite off more than you can chew on a small property.
Also, if you got a drone or a buddy with a drone likes to fly it, you get out there, you can stand on you and you can fly around hundreds of yards off of your property. It ain't illegal to fly over him.
Right, exactly.
And you can see, what he might have for food plots, a ways away. What he's got on the other side of his place, like you're saying, if you can't see that from the road.
Yeah, that's a great tool, too, and we've actually going to start using that on our consultations, too, because it is such a great thing to get up there and see what not only what they have going on their property, but what's going on around them.
Yeah.
And what maybe improvements have been made that aren't on Google Maps or Google Earth. You
Yep.
can see it real time, see everything that's up there. And on the small property thing there at the cabin, I've got some ideas for this year based on what's lacking around there. There's not an ag field, which is hard to believe around here. A mile and a half, 2 miles might be the closest one in any direction as the crow flies. Because I drove around this fall with that specific reason because I looked on Google Maps and thought, well, that looks like it could be. Ended up just being a pasture field, some of it CRP.
There's a lot of pasture, a lot of CRP. There's a sawmill that I think part of that where that sawmill's at actually used to be some ag field, which was a half a quarter away. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty decent sized field. So, like I said, things have changed. Yep. There's been within that half-mile range of that property, there's been at least 2 new houses, a sawmill, and maybe a pretty good-sized barn that's changed in the last 5 years. Yeah. So,
and I'm not trying to say that I'm going to go and put a destination food plot on this 10 acres, but if I could get some grain in there and a little bit different food plot program, because most of what they're lacking in that area right now is good food source, because the plots I do have, man, they just tear through them like a mower, and it's kind of the same way with your property there, Jeff. You got food around. You're not necessarily trying to create holding plots for those deer, but based on what you have around you is how we're going to attack, or how you're going to attack what you've got going on there.
Yeah, and I did this back in the past, and then and it worked out really well for me, and I kind of got away from it for I don't even know why. It just happened, but I got a 3-acre field on the south end of my timber. It's just a 20-acre patch altogether. 17 acres timber, 3 acres of field. But that the south end of it has road border right up against it. I mean, right there. And so what I've always done in the past, and what I'm going to do again this year, starting this year, I always plant like 6 or 8 rows of corn along the outside border of the food plot up against the road. Not necessarily for food, but for screening. Mm-hmm. Coons and squirrels and whatnot, and, the deer's going to eat on it some too. But, I'd plant that there for screening to protect them from the road. I've got some switchgrass, about 6 foot wide. I'm going to let that grow up again. And then I'll probably plant 5 or 6 rows of soybeans, deer beans, whatever, around there. And then in the middle is where I'm going to put my clover and chicory.
Yeah.
So I'm not only going to give them food, but I'm going to give them protection and cover from the road, and kind of like a sanctuary place for them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's worked out well in the past for me. Gosh, we're talking 8 or 10 years ago that I did that. It worked out really well. I was seeing does and fawns, and then later on I started seeing bucks coming in there, in the midsummer, eating and feeding and stuff. And so you just got, I don't know, you just got to know your property, know what deer's there, know what it's going to take to protect them, and also feed them and make them comfortable for being on your property.
Yeah. First you got to know what deer need,
Right.
which the biggest two things is food and cover. And then you got to know what's around you, and you got to know what you don't have.
Well, also, where I'm at, I've got, gosh, if you just break it all down, there's several thousand acres of agricultural land around me. So you're talking corn, soybeans, sorghum. They can go anywhere to get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to give them cover along with a different variety of food that's going to, like the clover and chicory, that's going to fulfill their
The needs they're not getting from the
needs
grain.
they're not getting from the grain crops. Something that's going to attract them to come to me. And not only that, I also use minerals. I'll put mineral licks and that out there for them also. So it gives them. I want to know what's going on my neighbor's property that they're not getting, that I can bring them to my property.
Yeah. And then we were talking about changes and stuff, and then again, even just seeing this time of year what's going on. Nate, I know there was pretty considerable change as far as going from ag to CRP on some of what you hunt this year. You noticed that had a big difference on the way they're moving and stuff. And I think when you get out there and walk it, this winter, spring, whatever, you're going to really be able to see where they were moving and changing and stuff.
Oh,
and
yeah.
either confirm what you already thought or,
Yeah, we didn't mow CRP until I think it was the 1st of December. We normally have a guy mow it, and he didn't get to it. He's got a ton of CRP that he's mowing now. He didn't get to it until late, so then he mowed it after gun season. And man, it was just dynamite. It really was. He left it standing there, and gosh, the deer were just everywhere out there in it.
Yeah.
They laid all over it. If that's an option for you, to do it that way, you might be risking mowing it when it's sloppy or something, in the winter, or if you can burn it,
Right.
if you could burn it late in the winter, if that's an option that won't change things, from the way you want it to be. But anyway, having all that standing CRP, I feel like was incredibly beneficial this year because I don't have too much cover, on what I got. And they used it just like they would woods,
Yeah.
So anyway, they stayed out in the CRP on those hillsides and stuff, and it was very beneficial. And then, like Jeff said, clover and chicory, next to the ag fields, I'm a huge proponent of that. I've been doing that for a long time, and it seems like good success.
Yeah.
They're the deer are at least doing what I'm wanting them to do. I'm killing the buck doing it. That's where the problem lies. But they'll get up, they'll come, and they'll hit my food plots on their way to those big destination fields. I guess you'd call it the staging area. They'll come, they'll hit that green plot, and they'll go on out and they'll hit the grain. Catch them hopefully somewhere where they're moving before dark. On their way to where they really want to be.
Yeah, that's like what you're talking about and what Jeff's talking about doing with his. Because you guys have those food sources close, those ag food sources, you're essentially just trying to draw them out to where you can hunt them before dark.
Yeah.
So you're giving them a reason to be there in front of your stand before it gets too late to hunt them.
Yeah. And I've considered planting grain, some next to, close anyway, next to some ag fields that we got. If they got corn out there, I'm not going to plant corn. I'm going to plant beans.
Right, right.
And if there's beans out there, I'm going to plant corn. I wouldn't plant what's already out there next to me,
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I've considered doing it. but I've had good luck with the green plots so far, being next to the big ag fields. So anyway,
I don't know if there's a nutrition in that they crave or if it's just palatable. Do you know?
The clover and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
they need it to a point, don't they?
there's more protein. I think it's protein in clover. It's an unbelievable amount more than it is soybeans or corn, either one. Because corn's mostly carbs, but the amount of nutrients and stuff they get out of a clover and chicory plot is so far exceeds what they can get from a grain field.
But I mean, do you think
that's
that
why
they
the attraction is there?
Do you think that that's why they do that? Because they know that, not that they know it, but
Yeah, I think so, partially.
their body says they need it. That's why they eat it.
Yeah.
Or if it's just, hey, this is a lot easier on my whatever than.
And I think it might be both. Maybe the start of it is it's palatable to them, and it's different than what they're used to. It gives them something different, and then on top of that, their body starts to realize that it's better for them, and they get more stuff out of it. So
I thought I'd read somewhere where they needed green to digest.
yes,
That they did need it. So if you can provide them with the best green possible, hopefully that's what's going to attract them.
I'll try to find it here real quick while we're on looking at it. I wrote an article, gosh, I don't know, it's been over a year ago now, on why clover was such a good option for food plots. And that's not to say I've actually, as much as I still like it, this year I've experimented with some other stuff and doing some reading and some research. I do really like the brassica plot mixed with like a winter rye and winter wheat, kind of half and half thing, maybe with some soybeans and some winter peas mixed in too. And I did some of that on my plots this year, and the deer just destroyed it. But again, it depends on what your goals are, what your property is like, what it's lacking, and all that. I'll try to find here. In this article that I wrote in 2020, a good stand of clover provides up to 4 tons of highly nutritious forage per acre. So there's that in and of itself. I mean, 4 tons per acre. You don't have to have a very big plot for it to feed a lot of deer. And that's part of the reason. I'll try to read in through here.
I know you can't keep a fruit tree on that property.
No, they'd destroy it.
I did both of them instantly.
Yep. Here we go. On average, deer eat roughly 6 pounds of forage per day. That comes out to about 1 ton per year. Additionally, they need about 16% protein in their diet. Most of what they eat only contains about 6 to 8%, making a few pounds of clover at 25% protein a very attractive addition to their diet. So most of the stuff that they're eating is 6 to 8% protein, whereas clover is 25% protein. So that's a huge difference in why, part of the reason why it's so attractive to them. Not only does it palatable, but they need it too. And it does help their digestive system as well. And I don't remember if we talked about this last time. I know I was talking about it with a client the other day. At a certain point, all the carbs and stuff, like the corn, if the deer eat it too late into the season, where it's cold, where it gets really cold, if they're eating too much corn, they don't digest it as well, and their body doesn't break it down as well, and it'll actually cause them to starve to death. It can plug them up and stuff too, and it causes a whole lot of issues for them, which is why I don't necessarily like feeding corn this time of year and stuff. And I'm not a huge fan of having corn food plots if it's late in the season, if it's gonna be really cold. And not that if you can have a right amount of it where that's not going to be an issue, but if you put too much of it out there for them, deer, they'll eat themselves to death, just like what we've talked about before. If there's too many deer in one area, they'll eat themselves to death by eating everything out. I mean, they know it tastes good, and I mean, they'll eat it to the point where they can't digest it or their body doesn't break it down like it's supposed to, and then that'll cause issues for them too. So adding in that clover and chicory or those brassica plots helps the health of your deer herd tremendously, even if it's a small amount. I mean, a half acre is 2 tons of clover per year at 25% protein versus the 6 to 8 they're normally getting. I mean, it's a huge difference just health-wise, let alone the attraction.
And that's what you're looking for, is a healthy herd.
Yeah.
Do you think cover this time of year, you think cover drives them more than food, or you think food drives them more than cover? Which one are they going to choose second
I
over
think
those two?
They go hand in
is
hand
there-
right now.
Yeah, is there a way to tell?
I think cover because you can travel to food.
Yep. They'll
But you're
deal
gonna
with
stay in the cover.
they'll deal with whatever food they got close to their best cover, or they'll deal with whatever cover they got close to their best food.
I think
Or is there a way to tell?
when it gets this cold, they'll
It's
probably
the
deal
cover.
with whatever food they got close to the best
Yeah.
cover.
Yeah.
I think it's probably right.
Yeah. Are you going to sit in the house with the stove turned up or the refrigerator open? Now, when it's 5 degrees outside,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You're going to turn the stove up and you're going to, walk over to the refrigerator, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, I guess being this cold, they getting up and moving to food ain't a big deal.
And
Beneficial for 'em.
feeding does keep them warm, but
Yeah.
I mean they're only going to feed. They're going to feed 5 times a day, and they're not going to do it all day long.
Yeah.
And that's where, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, you could have these great, lush green food plots or whatever. Brassicas this time of year that are still green, whatever it is, or beans that are still standing. If you don't have good winter cover for them, they're probably not going to be in there eating it because they can't get out of the cold anywhere. And if they are eating it, it's probably going to be at night. Because they're traveling to it from that better cover, in my mind.
You said you got mineral that you keep out. You do it year round. I've thought about trying to do that. I suppose I'd heard a guy say anyway that that's one of the best things you can do for them this time of year is when they need it most.
I haven't so much lately because I got out the hunting for a while.
Yeah.
But back when I was hardcore in it all the time, I always had minerals and have a mineral lick somewhere, especially close to a food plot that I have planted, And
Yep.
so, now there's a difference between attractants and minerals.
Yeah.
A lot of times you go to Walmart and stuff like, you get your, pure cane or whatever.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or like the buck jam or whatever. They
Yeah,
call it.
that's attractants.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't do
Come
the
here, deer. Yeah.
Yeah, come here, deer. That's attractants. So you gotta kind of know the difference there.
Yeah.
Forget the attractants.
You just call that cocaine till the cartel sued them and they can't call that anymore.
Right. Exactly. Seriously. Well, they used to call it cocaine. I don't know if the cartels was involved or not, but
I remember
but
seeing the bag.
yeah.
the deer cocaine, yeah.
Deer
And then now it's
cocaine.
just cane.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
There you
So,
are. Hey.
but know the difference between attractants and
Yeah.
minerals.
Yeah.
Forget your attractants this time of year.
Oh yeah.
Put the minerals out there and
Yeah.
feed them all year long.
Yeah.
And that's another way that you can get the deer used to coming to your property. They're seeking out something on your property that their properties don't offer.
Yeah.
And where an attractant won't have any nutritional value
It
for
has
them,
none.
a mineral has nutritious value for them and acts as an attractant of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And they're attracted to it. Obviously, a lot of that stuff they make different flavors and all that stuff too.
Well, it's just like what the hell was that? It wasn't a salt block, but
Trophy rock,
trophy rock.
yeah,
I
it's
love
mineral rock.
It's a mineral rock. I love that rock.
Yep.
And one thing about that, the trophy rock is even during the rain and stuff, it doesn't just dissipate all.
Yeah.
It's there during. It ain't like it's there during it's dry, and then you get an inch rain, and it's gone. You
Yeah.
got to replace it.
Yeah.
It withstands all that. The deer use it, and they'll dig a well out wherever you put it at.
Yep. Yeah. I know biologists have said, they need those trace minerals and all that year round. And I guess that kind of goes back to we were talking before we started recording, taking vitamins. I suppose there's no measurable way to know if it helps or not, but it can't hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's got to be good for them.
Yeah.
Because they come to it all the time.
Yeah, and I'm not plugging trophy rock by any means. There's other products out there that's just as good or probably better. I don't know, but that's just what I've experienced. Experimented with, and there's a lot of other. Majority of it is salt.
Oh
I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
but there's other trace minerals in it also. That the deer needs for nutrition and stuff, and so find something that suits you and attracts the deer and what you think they need on your property, and as far as minerals or trophy rock or whatever, something like that. I wouldn't suggest just throwing out a mineral block or a salt block that cows use, because their nutritional needs are different than what deer are. But find something, do your research, put that out there, especially during the green up, because that's when the deer use it the most. And put something out there that your neighbors don't have, that's going to bring the deer into you, not only in spring and summer, but also in the fall and during hunting season.
The biggest, I think, thing about the minerals is that probably gets them a bad rap is guys go in buying minerals expecting to turn a 150-inch deer into a 200-inch deer because they've been putting minerals out for them.
Yeah, it don't happen.
No. I mean, and that's where I think a lot of guys are like, well, they don't work. It didn't do anything for my deer. Well, it's not that they're going to magically grow big racks on deer, but they provide a lot of stuff for the deer that they're not going to be able to get especially now when everything's dead, from anywhere else.
Well, I think that's a testament. Nate said something about a biologist saying, that's just a testament that the deer either don't have the food naturally or aren't as interested in going as far for the better food. They're going to eat what they have in front of them, and then this helps them. And it's all about the health of the herd. If those minerals help your herd in the wintertime, you're going to have a healthier herd, which in turn means bigger racks eventually. It's not magic, but
Right.
Give them the best potential.
Yeah.
Set him up right.
Set him up right,
potential.
because there's more to racks than just nutrition.
Yeah.
It's just like the holding deer factors. I keep pointing on food, cover, and water. Well, the same way with racks, you got nutrition and genetics. And so you got to have a combination of both of those to get the kind of deer that you're really wanting.
Right. And we talked about that, it's been a few weeks ago now. Like the does, nutrition of them will make as big a difference in that buck's antlers and potential as the genetics from the buck. So if you're putting those minerals out for the does, if they're getting what they need now that they weren't before, are you going to notice a difference in the buck antlers? I mean, possibly, potentially.
you got to remember, most of the does right now are with fawn.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So they're
It's gonna help
growing
that fetal
right
development.
now. Yes, absolutely.
But again, it's not magic. But if you're putting that stuff out there, I don't see how it could hurt.
I got Kaylee taking all kind of vitamins, big handfuls of them right now.
Hey, like you said, it might not help, but what can't hurt, right?
That's right.
But that's coming in without a plan today or tonight. I think that's pretty much, we still got covered some good stuff, hopefully. So that's pretty much going to do it for this week. Thanks for listening, guys. Hopefully we're at least a little bit entertaining, even though we didn't have the guest. We'll have him on next week, hopefully. That's the plan as of right now. So,
well, my goal is to keep this entertaining.
Well, I don't know how good you're doing. I guess we'll see. If you guys think it's entertaining, leave us a review. That's a good way to support us. Go to iTunes, do that. Check out our website, richhunteroutdoors.com. If you need anything on there, you guys can get a hold of us through that. So, and if you ever have any questions, feel free to ask there, and we'll cover them on the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys again next Friday.